Ph.D. at SBGrid in Boston. Thanks for joining. It's my pleasure to welcome from our very own BioGrids scientific software curator, Jim Vincent. And from the group, he's going to talk about using BioGrids for SBGrid users. So Jim, go right ahead.
Thanks, Jason. I'm going to assume that everyone here is familiar with SBGrid. You're probably an SBGrid user, or you're at least aware of it because that's how you got invited here. But just to make sure we're all on the same page, I'm going to go over a few high-level things about both SBGrids and BioGrids. And I think that we all know SBGrid and BioGrid are collections of scientific software specifically designed to be easy to install, easy to maintain, and they're supported by real people, as opposed to titles that you might download yourself with various installation methods where you are on your own. But in particular, I would like to draw your attention to the academic software platform. BioGrids, both BioGrids and SBGrid are instances of the academic software platform, which was developed at Harvard Medical School, hosted at Harvard Medical School. So the underlying infrastructure, the software code itself, the people are all the same, more or less, for SBGrid and BioGrids. There's some specialization. For example, me, I am the software curator for BioGrids. I don't really install SBGrid software. But other than that, mostly everyone supports the platform as a whole, the academic software platform. And because of this, because the underlying platform is the same, when you want to use BioGrid software and you already have SBGrid installed at a site, there is almost no change required. Very, very little change from say, a systems management perspective to provide BioGrid software to all of your users. No change to system level libraries or things like that. No change to user startup shells or paths, nothing like that. So adding BioGrids is effectively an add-on, if you will. And because the underlying platform is the same, it really is as simple as sourcing a different shell. So the BioGrid software, to activate it and use it when it's installed on a machine that you have access to, is simply source programs biogrids.shrc instead of sbgrid.shrc. When you do that, all of the BioGrids titles become available to you in your environment, just like SBGrid software becomes available. So to give you a high-level overview of the differences between them, the BioGrid software is mainly a collection of life sciences software. This includes bioinformatics tools, and the collections that we use, the collections that are labeled in the installer and on the web page, include high-throughput sequencing, genomics, proteomics, visualization, some utilities. There are roughly 500 titles there, just like SBGrid software, about 500 titles. The collections for SBGrid are crystallography, NMR. I think you're familiar with all of these. And if you didn't know, SBGrid stands for Structural Biology Grid Software. So to give you an example of the kinds of programs available in BioGrids, this is a list of the top 10 programs by runtime for the past 3 months. If you're familiar with life sciences software, these will all be very familiar. SAM tools and R, BWA, and Aligner, Picard, STAR. The GATK toolkit from Broad is also very popular. These are common, very widely used tools. And just to contrast that, the SBGrid top 10 titles from the past 3 months are probably tools you're all familiar with: Coot, Phoenix, Chimera, Relion, and whatnot. So, as I said, the underlying infrastructure is the same, and We also have a similar setup with websites to provide help, downloading things, whatnot. This is the SBGrid website, which you're probably familiar with. BioGrids has a very similar website. It's made on sort of the same template. You can use this website to look up software titles to see if they're available in BioGrids or not, to download the BioGrids installation manager, to view the wiki that's available here for help. You can submit a bug just like the SBGrid software, SBGrid website also. And so just to be clear, make sure we're all on the same page. Maybe you're a user of SBGrid, but perhaps you're not familiar with how it works under the hood. At our end, at Harvard, it's the HMS infrastructure part here. The BioGrids, the SBGrid team, the academic software platform team, selects and installs software titles. We curate them in a database and they become encapsulated in the SBGrid environment or the BioGrids environment. And then on the right-hand side, this would be at the user end at a site, either a full institutional cluster, say, for a university-wide cluster, or maybe a large laboratory server that's shared among people in a lab, or personal laptops. And the installation manager works more or less the same on all of them. And if you're not aware, the really key part here is that when you install binaries on any one of these flavors of machines, you are literally downloading executable binaries and all necessary libraries from the academic software platform at Harvard. No compilation happens at the client end. No changes to the system, no operating system level changes are needed. There's no extra downloading of external dependencies, nothing like that. It all comes directly from HMS and our servers. The advantage of this is that you can install on any machine and get exactly the same software every time. And so in a site-wide installation, like on a cluster, a compute cluster, you will have, if you add BioGrids to your SBGrid collection, they will both live in the same place. They live under /programs, under x86 64 Linux for Linux machines, and i386 Mac on Mac machines. And to find out if BioGrids is available on your site, you can source the SBGrid environment, SBGrid.shrc or BioGrids, and type the sbinfo command. The first part of the output there will list the grid. That's what we call BioGrids or SBGrid. They're different instances of a grid, and you'll see it listed there. If BioGrids is available, you'll see both BioGrids and SBGrid listed for your platform. Let me just get that out of the way. So in a site-wide installation, as a user, if you're a user, there would be really nothing else for you to do. BioGrids is either available or it's not. And you can source the BioGrids SHRC file on your cluster or lab server, and off you go. And if you would like to install BioGrids on a personal machine, your laptop, or maybe a computer you have at home or whatnot, it's pretty straightforward, pretty simple. You download the BioGrids installation manager, register for a BioGrids account, and then activate the installation manager, and everything will become available there. And let me just add these links to the chat. And once you do that, the new installation manager, the graphical installation manager, looks something like this. If you read the small blue print below the activation boxes, you'll see there's a register link. That's just a link to the registration page as a convenience. The first time you start the installation manager, you have to activate it with key, either 3 keys if you have an old style, or a single key, which you may get if you're a new user. You can switch between them. So you just paste your credentials in there and click activate. And when that works and you're done, this is what the graphical installation manager looks like overall. And I'll open this up in a live demo in just a bit, and we can have a look at it and see how it works. The SBGrid installation manager is the same code underneath. It's the same program with a different badge. So it has a different flavor to it, but it will present you with SBGrid software. The BioGrids installation manager will present you with BioGrids software. And you can see the collections here on the left side, indicating that this is all BioGrids software. You can also download the command line installation manager, which is very convenient. The graphical installer is useful if you're not familiar with the software that's available. If you want to look through the different collections, look through the different software titles that are available and maybe their versions. It's easy to scroll and click. And there's a search bar at the top where you can search for your favorite tool. But if you already know what you want to install, you have an existing workflow or something, or a particular title you're interested in, the command line installation manager is very convenient, very easy. It's also very useful for automated installations, for example, installing BioGrids on an Amazon EC2 instance with a script and things like that. So I've shown here in the window, this is just what the activate command looks like for the command line installation manager. It will go through an initial setup of your the database and the installation. You'll be prompted for a administrative password, and so on. And so we're going to stop there with this live presentation and move to a terminal. And let me just paste in here a few things that I'll do. I'm going to try these commands out, and I'll paste them here in case you wanted to copy them, give them a try yourself if you have access to BioGrids already, perhaps on an institutional cluster or something like that. So let me just stop the share here and switch over. So this is the graphical installation manager. I've already installed a couple titles. I've used it, I've activated it. You only have to do the activation once. And once you install BioGrids or SBGrid, you've activated the installation. In this case, it's on my laptop. You can use either the graphical installer or the command line installer interchangeably with that installation. You don't have to activate again, and they will both recognize and use the same installation. So you can install a couple titles with the command line installer, then come and use the graphical installation manager to peruse some other titles, see what's available, so on and so forth. So the home page has a little bit of news, some updates, our monthly meetings for BioGrids tech meetings, and a list of the latest software. If you scroll down here, this list on the left-hand side is just a running list of software that has either been recently added to the collection or updated. For example, Python. We made some changes to Python. It's listed here at the top. On the left-hand side of this screen are the different areas of the program. The first is installed software. If you click on that icon, I get a list of the titles that I have installed on this machine. The BioGrids installer itself is always listed at the top. And then I have two other programs installed, FastQC and SAMtools. And for each of those, just one version, even though there are many versions available. The second icon on the left-hand side is programs. This is the list of all programs that are available. You can scroll through this It's a pretty long list. It's over 500 titles, but it goes very quickly. You can also click on the collections just to the right of that, say high throughput sequencing, genomics, proteomics. If you know you're only interested in proteomics titles, there are only 12 at the moment. This is a much smaller list to sift through. And if you find that you can't see a title that you're looking for, maybe it's not in the collection that you're looking at, you can either click on all programs at the top or programs on the left-hand side here, the icon, get back to the full list. And then at the top on the right-hand side, there's a search box. And you can start typing any tool. It's a look-ahead search box. So I'll search for SAM tools. And we see under the list for SAM tools, the name of the title, the collection that it's in, and then the versions that are available. There happen to be many for SAM tools. It's updated pretty regularly. And the right-hand column is the action that you would like to take. So for any particular version, you click install, and it will add that title, that version, to the installation tasks. You can see on the left-hand side here, under tasks, I have 2 waiting. I can click, let's say, on version 1.8. Now I have 3 tasks waiting, and you can see in the column that it says it has been added to the tasks list. If I go then to my tasks tab, I click on the icon there, I can see what I have waiting here. And SAM tools is added to the list, install version 1.8. And you will always have the site-wide installation update. If you install a single tool, you'll have these other 2 installation updates that happen after you've added a new tool. So it updates the database and all the underlying stuff. If I wanted to go ahead with this, I would simply click on the button up at the top, apply all tasks, and it would install, remove whatever is waiting to be done. And I can hit clear all tasks to just get them all out of there. And now I'm back to 0 again. So let me show you what that looks like with the command line installer. Switch back to my hopefully you see just the terminal, 1 terminal. I've already downloaded the BioGrids command line installer, and I've activated it. So I have that here. You can get help on all the different commands with the -H, like any other tool. But I'll just show you a couple of things. First, I want to look at software that I already have installed. It's the installed command. You can see here I have SAM tools 1.13 and FastQC. And the BioGrids installer itself is available. And the few commands that I added in the chat window over here, these are little utilities. BioGrids info and BioGrids list. So the BioGrids info tool gives you all of the information about a particular title. In this case, I looked at SAM tools. So the default version would be normally the latest available version. It would be the version that gets installed if you said install SAM tools without specifying a version. And since I already have it installed, that is the version that's in use on this installation right now. And it's confirmed down here. I have only version 1.13 installed. There could be more. I can install multiple versions in the same installation right here. And then the list of all available versions. So this is particularly important for reproducing workflows. if there are changes between versions of SAM tools, say version 1.13 changed the way some output works or some input that's expected, and you need to use version 1.12, you may want to install version 1.12 and specify that version for all of your workflows and commands and whatnot. And that's what the last line of the info here gives you, the name of the override variable. In this case, it's samtools_m. The M is for Mac. I'm on a Mac here. And then once you have a tool installed, the other command that's very useful is the BioGrids. Sorry, that was just a typo on my part. BioGrids list command. This gives you a printout, a list of all of the executables, the callable executables that are provided by that one title. In this case, SAM tools. SAM tools provides more than 20 other executables that you could call, in addition to just SAM tools. All of these other utilities come along with SAM tools. And finally, let me just show you what that looks like on a site-wide installation. Here I'm on the O2 cluster, the compute cluster at HMS, and I've just run the BioGrids command line installer installed command to list all of the available software titles, and this is the list. It's everything provided by both SBGrid and BioGrids. It's a very long list, including all of the versions. So you can see there are multiple versions of titles available. And if you're already familiar with SBGrid version overrides, BioGrids, of course, works the same way for any of those tools in exactly the same way, really. So that's it. If you have questions about BioGrids in particular, this includes bugs or problems you have, as well as new software requests. You'd like a new title available in BioGrids, send everything to help@biogrids.org. You can fill out a bug report on our website too, but they end up at the same place. They all end up here with us. And with that, I will end, and thanks for your attention.
All right. Great. Thanks, Jim. I'm going to, let's see, we can live dangerously and allow folks to unmute themselves. Let's see. There we go. That way, if we have questions, you could also raise your hand. I just wanted to point out a couple of things. One, if you already have SBGrid installed and you already registered and used the SBGrid installer, you can just download the BioGrids installation manager, and just, as long as BioGrids has been added to your configuration by us, you can just go. You don't have to reactivate or any of that stuff. So that's good. There's just one account really to manage all the software. You can use the BioGrids GUI and the SBGrid GUI separately to manage the two different. You can also use the command line to manage them. They have different shell environments, so you can source SBGrid.shrc or source BioGrids.shrc. They will unload and reload each other so that they have different environments, but you can't use BioGrids applications when you're in SBGrid and SBGrid when you're in BioGrids, because the shell environments are different, because they, the way we have applications sort of partitioned off, they're sort of separate. So for the most part, that's not really an issue. Because you're not usually wanting to like run Phoenix and SAM tools at the same time. And you could just open a new terminal and run it, BioGrids in one and SBGrid in the other, and it would be completely co-usable. I would note that having them both installed is large. So Jim has installed a lot of software titles in BioGrids over the last few years, and it is like SBGrid, I think, in the 500-ish titles with lots of versions. So you can do full installs of both, but make sure that you have lots of space available. I also would note, because I don't think we noted it on this call, is that Jim's background is not in structural biology. Jim is background is in bioinformatics. So he is a domain specific scientist who has used these applications and troubleshoots them every day in work through Boston Children's Hospitals and other BioGrids users. So if you submit a ticket and you've got a question about how an application works, you will actually get somebody who knows something about how those applications should be working, because I have to admit that I don't. I know very little about anything that ends in seek or anything that ends in so I'm very glad that Jim does, because he can help, because that domain specific expertise is sometimes critical in understanding, like, is this a bug, or is this a data input problem, or is this something else? So I think that's something from on the SBGrid side that me and Pete and Peter, we bring to the software stack, that we're structural biologists. So Jim's doing that for the bioinformatics titles. So we still have that sort of scientific expertise on that side. The BioGrids stack is in some ways kind of modern, mirrors where scientific software is going. It's different than the SBGrid stack in a lot of ways, and that the code is, it's less like, it's more interpreted stuff, a lot more Python, a lot more R. So if you're using R a lot and you want a rich catalog of R modules, the BioGrids stack has, what would you say, Jim, in terms of available R modules in the BioGrid software stack?
1,500.
Yeah. So is that could very well be all of the R modules. I have no idea. It's huge, right? So if you use R in your day-to-day, it might be worth evaluating BioGrids as a way to go. Let's see. I think that one thing that's also true about the BioGrid stack, just while we're on it, is that it's, I would consider it more HPC friendly, in the sense there's not that much graphical usage. Most people are running bioinformatics workflows on clusters at this point. I think there's a decent number of laptop users and stuff, but as opposed to SBGrid, where there's a decent amount of visualization, bioinformatics is really more a computational effort. So
there's a lot of work in the, a lot of people like to use BioGrids titles through Open on Demand on the cluster. Not that they're using graphical tools very much, but they use Jupyter and RStudio to develop right there on a node of a cluster, and then fire off a very large job on the same cluster. And BCH at least does training in that way. So they use Open on Demand with BioGrids R and Jupyter running on their cluster to do training classes for 50, 60 people at a time.
Yeah,
it's been very convenient for them.
Yeah, it's also great to use in the cloud. I know a lot of people have been able to use it cloud-based to move their workflows. And I still think SBGrid has BioGrids beat on lines of Fortran for I think that we win in that category. We still have a lot of the roots of structural biology go deep, so there's still a lot of C and Fortran in there. But, all right, great. Well, thanks everybody for joining. If if you have more questions, feel free to drop us an email. I'm happy to help@biogrids.org or help@sbgrid.org. We can get you. We can direct it to your question to the right person to get it answered.